Hi, I'm Patrick Palm, and this is the Learn from Leaders podcast. In this show, I interview favorite customers and other interesting leaders in product development, marketing, HR, executive management, investors. You find favorite leaders in many different places and in organizations doing game development and publishing, software as a service, and other tech companies, and big enterprises, going from very centralized command and control kind of organizations to a more modern way of working with a culture with high team autonomy and better alignment towards the company goals and values. So let's go.
Johannes, what was the biggest crossroad in your career?
Oh, the biggest crossroad. Yeah. That's a good question to start with, actually. Yeah. So I think it was when I stopped being the guy who actually, I've had two. So I can, and yeah. So I used to work in banks, being a financial advisor, and worked my way up there to sitting with wealthy customer, trying to do a holistic advisory of them. And at some point, I was quite frustrated with the systems, approaches, and things we had to support, how we were supposed to engage with our customers didn't really match. So I was quite frustrated about that. I had voiced that we got really good training and education, but the system and processes didn't really support us actually doing it. And some point, because I actually said that, I think it's stupid we don't exploit this even more and try to help people instead of putting up barriers. I was asked if I was interested in taking responsibility for actually creating that. So that was my lead into being a product owner instead of just being a doer. And so that was the first gig I had.
Mhm.
And that kind of sparked my curiosity because I've always had an interest of kind of design thinking. The Norman doors, the doors that you walk up to and push, and you should pull and say, why did I push that one if I should pull it? What signals am I getting? That kind of mindset, I've always had that. So when I dig into the product owner role, I really got to explore that, figuring out how to actually make a good design, how do I make this work and be useful, and why can I solve problem with my teams of developers that the project teams and big 3-year plan that created the system I was responsible for couldn't. Why could we solve some stuff in 2 weeks that they have given up on after 3 years? It kind of annoyed me that was the case. So I began to wondering about that and began to explore why can I actually create these amazing products when the big project couldn't really do it. Um, and after 7 years of doing that and exploring that as product owner for those kind of tools that I had used myself, someone asked me if it wasn't time that I do this full time instead of just on the side. That's 7.5 years ago now, and since that I've been different kind of agile coach, all roles, resembling that. Um, Basically, yeah. So I've had two major shifts.
So you said something interesting there. You said, you were interested in, so what I read was basically, you were able to do something amazing, basically with a small team that the bigger team couldn't
Yeah.
couldn't do. And what was your conclusion?
Yeah. So of course it's about having good peoples, but it's also, I think what we really did different from the project, the patterns in what I had done with that team, that 3 developers sitting in Poland, I was sitting in Copenhagen, and was that we actually worked close together, got to know each other, and I spent a lot of time trying to explain not just how I wanted them to solve a specific task, but what we are using it for. So why are we doing that? Why do we need this kind of calculation? Why do we want to show it like that? What do I want to achieve with that? So I really told the story of what I intended to do with the system, and that gave them a much better understanding of the problem they were trying to solve and made them able to find better solution, basically. where the project in itself had been kind of a classical state gate. Someone had described what they should do, and then they tried to do it as good as they could without really understanding the bigger context, just the task itself and the requirement that had been specified for. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does, and it makes me think about it. I remember when I got to know you, I learned that you sometimes are called Mr. Flow.
Yeah.
Where did where did that come from? What's the story behind Mr. Flow?
Oh yeah. What's the story of that? The story is that's what I keep coming back to. So one of the things I see that in the way that I might be a bit different than most people is that I tend to think in systems. I tend to think of the holistic things of it. And that means I often talk about why do we create stuff? Why did we want to solve this problem? How do we actually solve it? And what result do we get from it? So the full flow of how we do things. So the first thing I did in the current role 7 years ago was actually to begin to visualize how we actually did our projects, the flow of them. And I talk a lot about flow because I'm really inspired by Lean and Agile and flow-based metrics and how to optimize for that, value chains and all these things. It's all back to the basic of getting your work to flow through the system. And when you have said that enough and have enough workshops with that, enough training in that, enough internal posts and articles and stuff like that, then at some point someone picked up that I was just Mr. Flow and began calling me that. So it isn't something I have chosen myself. It's something that the organization decided that was probably my title.
So, I mean, I know you've been doing, plenty of, talks at conferences, and you have taught a lot of people to be much better at these things. But I would love to hear your take on a bit. Let's call it, state of the industry. It's kind of funny to ask that question, now in a time when so many things are so turbulent on so many fronts. But if we don't talk about everything in the world, and we focus on the whole organizational work, flow-based approaches, like lean, agile practices, etc. I mean, I got into this space. It's more than 20 years now, and there's been so many books written, so many conferences. I have my observation that I would like to test if you have a different perspective on is that my observation is that there was almost like a bigger interest like 10 years ago. There was more of an eagerness, to learn new techniques, to work better. There was a lot of optimism, and my observation is that it's less of that today, which in a way is a little bit depressing. But maybe you have a different view.
So yeah, I see where you get that and where that comes from. I even read articles like Agile is dead and stuff like that. I don't think it is. I actually just think it's growing up, it's becoming mature. And it isn't new anymore. So that's kind of a intoxication of something new. New ideas kind of intrigue us and we want to come and listen about all these new thoughts. Right now, AI is something new and interesting that everyone wants to work with. And at some point, that just become standard. It's just a way of work now. It's just, Agile isn't new anymore. I can't really find an organization that hadn't tried to work with Agile and Flow. They've all tried something. So it isn't a new, interesting thing. It's something, yeah, we've done some of that, and some worked and some didn't. But that doesn't change the fact and the science of lean, Agile, Flow, that's still there. That still makes sense, and you can still improve on that. But the novelty of it has kind of disappeared. Yeah. So it is more, yeah, it's, we know that it isn't new anymore. So yeah, some of the energy that you have with new things are not there anymore. I can agree on that. Yeah.
Do you, I guess, with, a lot of things that becomes very popular, it also reaches a stage where, maybe see if I can formulate this the way I mean it. That you get a bit of kind of buzzwords. So let's it's a classic thing that to be agile rather than doing agile, and you might have organizations where they have it's become, let's say, more buzzwords than action that have given you better results, and that can over time create a bit of a cynicism.
Definitely.
Where if I go back to what you said, that it's been growing up, I for sure have observed, like I can just look at Faro customers, that there are organizations where it's good practices has become normalized. So it's the same thing as I remember Alistair Cockburn said at an Agile conference many years ago, that in the future we're not going to talk about Agile software development anymore. It's just going to be software development.
Exactly.
And I think that has happened in many organizations, which I guess is the growing up thing that you're talking about. But I also think that there are other organizations where maybe they simply have not had a very successful implementation of practice, and then it turns into cynicism instead. Maybe you can share some light on that from your perspective.
Yeah. So I think there's a lot of organization that has gone for the quick fix. So Agile seems to be a good idea. It seems to be something people are doing, and they're talking about half, double, and a lot of better results. So I've seen that myself, that you can actually get that. And I've talked about that, and people are listening to that and say, oh, that sounds really intriguing. We should do something like that. So what solutions can we do? And then you get sold something like SAFe, one of the other models, and you try to implement that. And that's just a big transformation of your organization. And it doesn't necessarily solve anything for you, because it's someone else's solution to their problems that you're trying to apply to your situation. And you might be lucky, and there's enough of mix that a lot of things that align, so you actually get something good of it. But a lot of the times you'll also get a lot of bad. It's like taking a medicine and not reading all the by effects you'll get of this medicine. So if you don't get the benefits, but you only get the side effects, that can be a really pain afterwards. You can actually end up worse than you were before if you do it like that. So I think it is about trying to figure out what are the problems I'm actually trying to solve. What is my reason for actually doing this? Why am I doing this? What is the intent of this? And if you focus on that part, then it's easier to find ways and solutions that can actually help you. But it is also a matter of, the Shu-Ha-Ri approach to teaching that you use in martial art, that you should start with doing something as the instructor tells you, like the old Karate Kid movie where he paints the fence to learn a move. So give a muscle memory of how to doing things. That's where you start in most organizations. But if that kind of frameworks of things you need to learn how to do, have a retrospective, do a stand-up meeting, you'll never really get past that Shu state where you have to do what the instructor tells you. And that's really not engaging. It's really not inspiring, because you're not really beginning to adapting it to your situation. You're just doing as someone told you to do. So you need to move out of that state quite fast to move up to the Shu, from the Shu to the Ha, where you actually begin to challenge the method and saying, like if you're in a Scrum framework, you could say that, well, we have a retrospective and we talk about improving the organization there and the team there. But if that's your only approach to improving, is to talk about it in the retrospective, then you're not really that mature. Then you're still doing it on the Shu level. If you're figuring out other ways to actually talk about it and do improvement and find your own pattern, how do we actually improve the organizations? Well, then you have matured beyond them, and then it's more engaging, then it's more inspiring for the organization. And you will probably create some better results based on that.
Since you're into these models, I mean, keep going. We're talking about the Shu, and can you give some more examples of healthy patterns in an organization that have been going from Shu to Ha, and then if you can also just continue into Ri. Yeah, having you in the conversation. I mean, you're like the ultimate person to kind of pick the brain on this. So please keep going on that.
Yeah, I can try. Yeah. So you could say the patterns that you see is something like Scrum would be the ultimate shoe. It's quite simple, and it's quite descriptive of what you should do. So if I should start a new team that's never worked as a cross-functional agile team, I would say something like Scrum is probably a good start to get them started and learning the method. But if I'm approaching a team that has more maturity, has tried something like Kanban that basically says start with what you do now and begin to improve from there. That's more finding your own way of improving, more conscious of what you're trying to achieve. So you're not doing stuff just because someone is saying it's good to do stuff. You're doing stuff because you want to improve. That means you can also challenge what you're doing and say, okay, but that way of doing it, if this is our situation, in our condition, we actually want to tweak it a bit and try to do it like this. That's basically the difference between the Shu and the Ha. The Ri is the really mature. That's when you have figured out that what other people are doing, well, that is what they did to help them. But you probably need to discover your own way and your own patterns. And that's where you probably end up designing your own framework and calling it something else. And that's might also be a sign of maturity of Lean Agile, that we see a lot of these new frameworks popping up and new methods and new names and all the different branches of it. That's basically, the mature tree of Agile methods that's blooming. That you see a lot of new words and methods and descriptions, and they don't disagree. They're just saying, well, this is a good way for us to do it. We have learned this during the way. You might learn from that. But if you listen carefully to them, a lot of them are beginning to say, you shouldn't copy paste me. You should learn from me and try to see if this could help you. Well, when we started, it was a lot of, you should do Agile like this. And you had a lot of war between, is it Kanban or is it Scrum? Something like that. But today it's more of a blooming tree, basically.
Mhm.
The blooming cherry trees, basically.
You mentioned new things popping up. Is there a particular new framework or trend that you like or maybe dislike?
I see the pattern. It is that I don't get that excited about the new patterns anymore, because I see them as new patterns basically, and new solutions to problems that I can see the elements that, oh, they've done it like that. That's interesting. These over here did something similar. So of course you can find new methods all the time. Some of them look really interesting. Some of them have improved things that other got wrong. But I would not go out and say that this method is the one you should be looking at now, because by saying that, someone would hear that and say, oh, then that's the new way we should do things. And no, it isn't. It's just a new way someone found out that might be a better way, but it most definitely is not designed for your situation. So you should always try to find your own solutions to the problems, but be inspired by other people. So I would try not to mention something more advanced than Kanban and Scrum, to be honest.
So when it comes to emerging trend, one is for sure various frameworks around product management. I had another podcast interview here recently, and we discussed specifically the product operating model.
Yeah.
You have the flight levels approach.
Yeah, definitely. Things and just to things that I'm actually using as well as inspiration and telling people about. So that's definitely good ways of doing things. Yeah.
Is this is this the revenge of the business people?
No, I don't think so. I think it's more of I think, yeah. So I understand why you could see it like that, because it is kind of tech came up with the Agile, and now someone is taking over. I think that's actually, again, I think it's a maturing things that now we are actually talking more about the business instead of the entire business, not as a business side and the business people, but the organization as a whole. We are trying to talk more of a common language across the different functional silos that we used to have. And we are acknowledging that we have silos. No matter what we do, we have silos. But do we want the silos that we got because we grew up like that? And most companies starts with a handful of people that created something amazing together. And you have like a hacker, hipster, and a hustler. It's kind of a lean way of approaching that. And at some point, you discover that you need more than one hacker. You need more people that can code and solve the problems. So you begin hiring more of those. And then the first one became a manager of those people, and they are kind of creating the little cult with their specialties. And the same is true for the other domains you start with. And when you do that, you create your silos, your functional silos. That's how most organizations are organized from starting. You start with that. You have your HR hiring people. You have your tech people doing all the technical stuff. You have your sales people and sales organization, all that stuff. That's kind of functional silos. But what we're beginning to see and realizing, and what I think this is a symbol of with stuff like the product operating model is, in the end, what made those first people successful was that they connected a good product to a customer end to end. That's really what made them able to grow. And they kind of lost that direction when they grew up and become more focused in their specialities and their focus area, their own domains, and kind of forgotten how they created things together. And that's basically what stuff like the product operating model is about, is trying to create that end-to-end responsibility and alignment around the product that you provide to a customer.
Have you seen those, let's say, go a little bit wrong? I'll tell you why I asked the question, because when you describe it now, it sounds great. And I think it is great in many cases. But I think I have observed also an anti-pattern in some cases where the product management part of it really is basically going back to waterfall and things becoming very linear. When I've seen those cases, it's making the silos almost like even worse. Plus, some going back to waterfall as well. So, but I also have seen both examples and people being interested in what you're describing, because there's quite obviously a big need there. And I think going back to what you said in the beginning, that if you get this right, if you can really outperform your competition.
Yeah, if you get it right. That's a good point. Yeah, no, but definitely, and yeah, you of course you will see answer patterns in this as well. It isn't like, again, there isn't just a simple solution. It isn't like you should just operate like the product operating model and then all your pain will disappear and it'll be nirvana. That isn't how the world functions, because you are optimizing for something. So what are you optimizing for? And if you're optimizing for something else than creating good products in the hands of a customer and creating some value based on that, then you are probably misaligned somehow. And I think you see a lot of that, even with people who are saying, oh, we're doing the product operating model, but we see all these pains and we see waterfalls and we see, yeah. So I wouldn't say that you're doing it wrong, but you might have the wrong focus. You have ended up optimizing for something else than what is your goal. And as these things I'm saying here, it's not that it's something new that I'm inventing now. If you look back to people like Goldratt in the 80s, he talked about that. What are you trying to achieve at the end with your organization? Always have that in mind. You're trying to create some value. It might be monetary, but it could also be beneficial for the society or something, but you are trying to create some value together as an organization. Keep that in mind. Optimize for that. Have that as your North Star and align around that. And then you can overcome those problems you're seeing. Definitely. But if you're beginning to dig down into the rabbit holes of oh, no, now we're doing product operating models, so every team needs to be a product teams. And I've seen product teams that I have a really hard time figuring out what the product is they're actually trying to provide and to who they're providing it. But it is a team, of course, yes. But just calling them a product team doesn't really, just putting the label on it isn't really the thing. If you get what I mean.
Yeah, and if we think about startups, you will have, the market will be a very brutal judge of what you're creating. But I'm guessing, when you're in your case, you're in a large telecom enterprise. I guess there's a big risk that you could be working on something and spend quite a lot of resources on it, but you might not really know, are we doing the right thing, for the right thing? How can you counter that? I mean, I guess you can take things pretty far and spend a lot of, time and money on something, and then you basically ended up with nothing because you got all of these things wrong. So what kind of methods and tools can you use to get it right when you're operating within a large enterprise?
But Patrick, what you're just asking for here is actually the argument of why we should focus on agility, on our fast flow, because we need that feedback loop. We need a feedback of, is this really the right thing to do? We can't spend 2 years trying to develop a new product without testing it with people, because it might be right what we're doing, and it might be right 2 years ago, but 2 years has happened. A lot of things has happened in the market. A lot of customers has left us, new has come in. It might not be the right anymore. So this faster we can go out and validate all our assumptions, because it is just assumption. And this faster you can learn, are you actually on the right path? Faster you can navigate and trying to correct and figure out how to solve these problems, or what problems not to solve. Because there are problems we should just be better at deciding that, no, that's not really what we should do. Let's not do what we're doing right now. So yeah, but if
I challenge you a little bit harder here. So okay, so we got the fast iteration going now. So we got good flow, we have fast iteration. But the result will also depend a lot on the kind of signals you're getting, right? So are you? I mean, I can't help but I'm thinking about the innovator's dilemma. I did a podcast recently about big bet leadership. Kind of how hard it is to make significant new things, within a large organization, and what you can do about that. And I'm guessing that all of those kind of things are gonna hit you in the face, when you're trying to do this. So do you have any tips for okay, so how do we make sure that we can make so we actually get, let's say, leverage on our fast iteration?
Yeah. So if you are in a really big old organization, that is really hard. It really truly is, because it's not optimized for that. It's the system, the processes, the organization. It isn't really optimized for what you're trying to achieve. It's optimized for maintaining what it has now with all the power structures and politics and everything. It's really optimized for something else, and you're trying to get products into the market fast. What I've seen some do is actually say, okay, we actually acknowledge that, so we are going to create a different small fake company and put it somewhere, not in the same building, but close to us, so we still can say they're part of us, but let them have an independency and ask for help when they can, but let them try to find out, how should we actually do this? If you were to do this like you wanted to do it, how would you do that? And give them that freedom of trying to solve the problems they think is worth solving, and get the feedback loops and improve and learn. because the big organizations, they're really not optimized for that anymore. There isn't many of them that have done that. I think that's basically why something like Amazon is so interesting still, because they're still growing, and the way they're growing is still exponential. They're still growing faster every time they grow. And I think that Jeff Bezos' big mandate is kind of one of the key to that. The autonomy he gives into the teams, and the way that they should run like small companies themselves and expose what they're doing through their APIs. That's a magic thing there. I'm not saying that Jeff Bezos is an idol we should worship or anything like that, but there's a pattern there that I think we can learn from, because there isn't that many big organizations that can still grow the way Amazon's can. They've solved something that a lot of big companies haven't.
So tell me more about what you mentioned the term a big mandate. Can you elaborate a little bit on what that means?
Yeah, so that's basically, for the people who don't know that's Jeff Bezos at some point wrote an email to people with this big mandate, and look that up. That's easy to find on Google. So I'm not going to quote that for you, but I think the important thing is his intention was to create a really clear purpose and framework for his leaders to actually be able to make their own decisions and act independently within the frames he was giving them. So he was kind of leading through. The intent was that they should be able to operate independently in the team. So he kind of gave the frame for that. And they should, within the context of Amazon, they should try to operate basically as small companies. Amazon Web Service, one of the biggest web service providers today, was created like that. That's where they started. They provided web service for Amazon internally. And at some point that was good enough for them to sell it externally. So he tried to create the framework, the conditions that could actually make stuff like that thrive within Amazon. That's the power of this big mandate, basically. And that's what I think more people should try to really do in organization, try to create those conditions that will allow the organization to build new ideas like that and create new product inspiration ideas from within the organization.
So what's holding back? Because from a business point of view, Amazon is a pretty obvious success.
It is, yeah.
So there must be a reason why not everyone is working with big mandates like that. What's holding people back? What's holding organizations back?
I think that again, we're back to you probably have to know each individual organization to answer that correctly. But I think there's a lot of psychology in it, to be honest. It's a lot of the leader's viewpoint and point of management, and how are you actually acting as a leader? Are you a command and control people who actually like to see the plans, like people to follow the plans, like people to have the follow-ups and make sure that that's really aligned with what you want to do and want to achieve? Are you the kind of leader who loves to go into the teams and help them by solving their problem as a hero manager? Or do you think that you should put the intent and the direction you want and let the team kind of figure out themselves how to do that, and let the organization figure out themselves how should we then solve for that? So there's a lot of management styles that needs to be there in order for the organization to be let free like that. And you need to let go. You need to kind of, as a manager, you really need to trust your people. And that can be scary, especially if you're not used to it and they haven't done it before, because what is the guarantee that they will not do something completely stupid? And how can I control that and stop that in time? And well, that requires you to work in a completely different ways, because it's different parameters, different things that you should follow than what you're used to. It's a different mindset. So it's basically. And I think that's what you need. And then you need that to kind of foster in the organization.
You mentioned AI before when we talked about, what's
new,
what's hype, what's new, what's hyped, and obviously there's a lot of hype right now, and so my question is this: are we talking simply productivity improvements? If I for a second just stick to product development and coding, there's some pretty obvious improvements that can be done there. I mean, at Favor, we were both early and deep with this, and it's been absolutely amazing. But do you see that? Do you see some more fundamental changes that will happen beyond simply just productivity improvement? We've been talking about siloing an organization. Do you think this will draw the organizational lines, so to say, in a new way? Or if we think a bit more visionary and organizational long term here, what kind of consequences do you see coming out of this?
I think AI will accelerate things you're doing, basically. And if you're doing bad things, it will accelerate bad things. And if you're doing good things, you'll get more good things faster. So yeah, in a sense, it is just a productivity increase, but you'll get an Einstein in your pocket that can help you with things that you didn't thought you could manage before and way faster. And that's brilliant. But the AI can't really see what you're doing wrong in terms of the big picture unless you ask it. So it's back to asking the question of what should we really optimize for? Why are we doing this? And that question, I haven't seen an AI do that now. I could be surprised if you and will probably will at some point, but I think if you are good at using AI, of course, it can help you seeing patterns that you couldn't see yourself because they're simply too complex for the human brain by itself. And you can see them faster. But again, it's what are you trying to achieve? What are you optimizing for? And if that's a local optimization, AI will help you do that faster and better. Yes, but it's still a local optimization. You will still just get the best finance reports ever anyone has ever made. Brilliantly. But is it helping you? Outside of finance, is it helping the organization actually create value end to end? Is it helping with better collaborations, with better understanding of what's actually going on? And it will only do that if you ask it to do that. So it is more about how you use it than what it actually is.
Yeah. Well, we have been talking about frameworks earlier here, and I mean some methods and frameworks. Well, in general, frameworks and methods, build upon practices that have been working for someone, and potentially they are applicable for others. And if I take a very concrete thing like doing estimates, there are old school, not so accurate ways of doing that, and there are more efficient flow-based ways of doing that where you can get much higher accuracy. So, I mean, if I can take a Favor example here that you can be setting up Favor basically like Jira, and you will break everything down into small tickets, and then you have people putting in estimates and you aggregate up, etc. So you can do that, but that's a bit of a waste of the capability of our platform, because it's very much designed for a flow-based approach, and it automatically gives you control charts and things like that, and then you can get those kind of metrics, and that will give you better estimates. But obviously there is an aspect here of that you need to understand, you need to be educated that is a better approach. And my question here is that could we imagine an agentic approach to this actually helping you kind of calculate, if you basically ask the question, when is this going to be done, you can try to calculate that in different ways, and the AI might be smart in hand-holding you, actually calculating it the right way rather than the wrong way. So you don't need to know what the right way is. You just need to know what the right question is.
That's a good framing.
So that's something I'm quite enthusiastic about, and I'm kind of hinting at stuff we're going to release here, of course. But what I think is cool with that is that it will help, let's say, lift it will have, in the same way as everyone's talking about vibe coding right now. And the cool thing with that is, of course, that you don't need to be a great coder to actually do things, which is very cool in itself. But this is a little bit the same thing, that you need to be less of an expert in product management techniques and but still actually do really good stuff. So that's something I can see. And I mean, I was just taking one example now. I think about this more in general terms, but do you see that we can basically, AI can kind of lift us in how we do things?
Yeah, but definitely. So I write better articles because I use AI. Definitely. It's still my article, it's still my point, and still my storyline. But when you try to write an article, you start with oh, what should the first line be? I really don't know. I spend a lot of time creating that content. If you use AI, you can basically say, okay, I want to tell a story about this, and this. I want to include this and not that, and we want to have that angle. Then you'll get your first draft within 15 minutes. And you actually have something that you can begin to improve on. If you just published what you had there, then you should be banned from using AI. Use it as a partner helping you to improve. Then you will really get something good of it. Then you can take that article and say, okay, so I hadn't thought of that, but I'm also missing this and this. So I will try to improve that, and then do iteration with your AI. So using it as a sparring partner, basically. And that's why you can really improve doing stuff like that, because then you're not just yourself sitting, trying to do stuff and talking about flow. You don't have to wait for your colleague to actually have time to help you, because the AI have time now. So all that waiting time we have in our day-to-day job of trying to figure something out, so I write an email or do a forward card and a note and send to a colleague and wait for them to respond. The AI will respond. So when you measure touch time of a task from the task is started till it's done, and say, okay, that's so weeks of doing that stuff of this particular task, how much of that time did we actually work actively on it? And when you look at the reports and the good surveys of that, it's between 5 and 10% of good organizations. 5 to 10% of the time that it took to actually deliver the stuff was the time that you were actively working on. The rest of the things, it was just after that time, it was just sitting in queues waiting for the next step. And I think AI can really help you there to get those feedback, get those next steps, because there are a lot of small things that you can just say you have actually insourced that to your own little team, to yourself.
It makes a lot of sense, and I guess you're extrapolating this point to so many areas. You took the example of the article, but the way I understand your point is that this will really go across the board on everything.
Yeah, I'm not a coder, but I could actually get some code with the help of an AI. That I can say, oh, that's actually the first draft of it. I might need someone else to help me to be done, but I could actually move a long way along that line before I need someone physically else to help me.
Yeah, and those numbers that you were giving here, I mean, if you can, you were talking about, roughly 90% basically waiting time.
Yeah.
And if you can cut that, that's a massive improvement in speed in your organization.
Definitely, yeah. And if you can cut that with just 5 or 10%, it will be so much more than all the energy you use to how do I actually code more efficiently when I code. And that's the 5 to 10% you're improving there. But if you can actually target your AI on the 90%, that will give you so much more much faster.
Interesting. So I'm going to ask you a question with an example. So have you seen this documentary on Disney Plus called I think it's called Light and Magic or so? It's about Industrial Light and Magic, the special effects company.
No, I haven't.
Have you seen the documentary okay? So there's a very interesting episode there where they describe how computer graphics came into the film world. And they're talking about Jurassic Park and how they had intended to make Jurassic Park with puppets, the old way. And then there was basically two guys in a little bit of a separate room. So that kind of goes back a little bit to what you were saying about here with the Innovator's Dilemma and being able to do new stuff. So they were the ones working on this new computer technology. And they describe here in the documentary that the moment when they're showing this animated Tyrannosaurus Rex walking, everyone in the room understood that the film industry has changed forever now. And they switched and decided to make the movie in that way instead. But what I want to get to is there was so many people then that worked as puppet makers, and they very, very quickly would lose their jobs.
Yeah.
But not all of them did, because one of the things you need to do is that actually doing the animation, the craft there is to understand what does movement look like, what does good movement look like. So instead of them trying to make these puppets move in a natural way, they now had computer tools. So they needed to basically, instruct the computer model, how to move. So they didn't, well, some of them at least, did not lose their job. They applied their skills around basically, how things should move, the animation to computer model instead. So it's pretty radical shift. Now, my question here is do you think we'll see a lot of this going on as well? Because it seems like there's no way around that. There's going to be a pretty massive shift to some jobs, and some jobs might not be needed anymore, or much fewer. For example, when it comes to coding, it definitely looks like we're going to need fewer coders, but better ones. Because they are really orchestrating an army of bots,
Yeah. So they will need to acquire some new skill set. But I think the good thing is that a lot of things that the AI is actually solving for us is a lot of the routine tasks, a lot of things, the repertory tasks that are not that interesting to do day out and day in. They are helping us doing faster, but they cannot do them on their own. They need you as a sparring partner as well as you need them as a sparring partner. And to be honest, I wouldn't be that concerned as a developer, because if of course you need to understand AI, you need to be able to probe with AI, you need to listen to Henrik Knieber in his career shift now, and go into that. They need to try to understand what AI is and requires. And then there will still be a job for me, because we still need people to help us solve the problems that we have. And I can see as it is now, we have problem hiring enough people that can actually do that. And AI can help us leveling up the people we have, and maybe make it less of a resource issue for the organizations, because it is a problem for the organizations today to get enough good coders. It's really hard to do that. And I think AI might actually help on that. I don't think we necessarily will be fewer people. I think we'll just do more.
Yeah. Oh, that sounds great. I like that you have such a positive view on the future. I came across a new term yesterday. I mean, I guess you are particular with steampunk, right?
Yeah, of course.
They kind of like art stuff. Yeah, and there's a dystopian take on that. And yesterday I came across something new. It was called solar punk. Have you heard about that?
No, that's new to me as well.
Yeah. It's
solar punk.
Solar punk, and it's more of a fluffy and bright and positive future take, and there's some very interesting art around that. So that was something new I learned yesterday.
You need to Google that.
Yeah. So on the topic of technologies that help us, I do need to ask something also here about Favro, because we one of the things we were thinking was that when people are working more basically more like a hybrid organization, it puts bigger requirements on the tools that you're using, because your primary office is really what happens online rather than what happens in the physical space. And the way we were thinking about this was that this was already happening, before COVID, because most organizations are large enough that they are in practice a team of teams. And also we have an increasing amount of business being done, between organizations. So what I mean by that is that, whatever it is that you're creating, a product or service, it is really happening as a collaboration between organizations. So you can think about this as a more, let's say, networked economy. So all of these things were happening already before COVID, and then obviously with COVID, there was an explosion in remote work, and most organizations today, I would argue, even the ones that have done a return to office mandate, they are to some extent hybrid, because typically not everyone is sitting in the office all the time, or even if they are sitting in the office all the time, they are collaborating with people that aren't sitting next to them. So, so there's just no way around that. Our most important office is really, what we do online. That's how we felt about it. So, and this is why, one of the reasons why we're very driven to create tooling for planning and collaboration that is much more flow based and collaborative. I mean, that's our whole approach. So I have two questions then for you. One, do you feel like we say we have managed to make something different there? Did we succeed in our vision to actually make something that is more collaborative and flow based? And well, if yes, more specifically, what is it that you like with Favro, and if no, how should we get it right?
So so the first answer there is yes, because we are still using it after 7 years, and it's not that I've been here for 7 years and we used it even longer. And it's not that we haven't had the opportunity to use something else. We actually had part of the organization saying we should use something else, but we have refused. And I think the primary argument for saying why do we want to continue using Favro is, there's one is the usability of it, basically, that it's easy, it's engaging, it's nice to look at. I can just go in and start working. People understand it when they see it. They can just start and get started. That's definitely one thing. That also means that my director has actually used Favro for his personal work, just decoupled from everything else, but he has Favro boards just for his personal work. And I know by a fact that he has never opened some of the other tools for that without mentioning anything. So that's it's just easy to get started. The other more fun with the mental things, because there are of course other boards and systems that have a nice look and feel, but the flexibility in Favro and the agility that allows that we can have teams working in completely different ways and with completely different views. Some have like a list of tasks, and some has a Kanban board, so really up to the team to decide how they want to visualize the work, how they want to break it down. And we can still have the same task on both boards. We can still see the comments across the teams, and we can break it down on one board and keep it without breaking it down on another board. That flexibility of actually having, you can take all the tasks you're on and visualize them on your board, and I could do that, and then I could run my Kanban board right to left as I like to do it, and the main portfolio board where some of the same tasks are also on can be a standard left to right board. Management team can have a list of some of the teams with status on them, just basically with the flow that makes sense in the content and how they visualize it. At their setting and where they are, they can actually just support that and are not being told you all need to follow this process. Because do we have a process that describes the entire organization and unify how we do things across marketing, development? We have telco, we have people setting up the telco network masked, really repository, simply and predictable work. And then we have people trying to figure out how to make the new campaign that will actually engage people and what we should do there. Something we really need to try to be creative and do stuff in a different way. That's the same process. That's not the same way of approaching it. Things that's not, a card can't be called an epic and work on both boards because it's completely different things. And we can't standardize that. We need to make that allowance of freedom of individual adaptation for the teams and how they actually want to see it to solve their problems and help them improve. And Favre can do that. Favre allows that. And I haven't found other tools that really do that in that same way. So that's why we're sticking with it. As long as I have anything to say, that's what we're gonna do.
But I'm happy to hear that, and I think you're touching upon something there. We talked before about Shu-Ha-Ri, and the way I'm reading what you're saying is that if you want to be successful with a very let's say very conscious Shu-Ha-Ri approach to what you're doing, let's say that you have one situation where it is a very strict workflow. You need to have it quite locked down. Well, then you can do that with Favre, but then you have another team. They are much more in a like a Ha stage, and then you have a third team which is more of in a Ri stage. So we can take all that into account. And I mean, I just the way we were thinking about it when we designed it was that if you're going to have a team which is truly iterative in their approach to work, you have things like frequent retrospectives, and which means that you're going to need to iterate on. You need to not only be able to create your workflow, but also iterate on what that workflow looks like. And then you have things like automations where, when you start automating your workflows, well, you should be able to do that yourself. You should have those tools yourself. And then finally, the way you put the dashboards on this, I mean, metrics to me is something that, you're going to be iterating also how you measure, it's most likely not going to be that you create one dashboard and that's it. You probably like keep iterating on what does that dashboard look like and what kind of different metrics do you have. So, I mean, and I would love to get your take on this. What we have been thinking is a bit broken in the tool business is that all of these kind of things tends to be very, very heavy with IT, that, creating a workflow, updating a workflow, creating automations, creating dashboards, all of the ability to do that lies with IT, and the organization basically has to take that. And then, but I think that creates, our analysis is that creates two very, very significant problems. One is that very often, well, first, the response time of making those changes will be long. If you have a retrospective on Friday and you want to update your workflow on Monday, and that doesn't happen because you need to send a ticket to IT, and they might or may not
waiting hours for that.
Fix that. I mean, it kind of breaks that whole ability to work with continuous improvement. And the other thing is that IT normally, they don't have the domain knowledge. So you might ask them, okay, please update to this and this, but they're changing things in a, they are in a different, it's not their job to be experts in, what kind of workflow and how you iterate around that in a certain part of the organization. So, so basically, our analysis is that, a good IT approach when it comes to tooling in a modern organization is more of a walled garden approach, that they make sure that the tools that are being used are living up to security, data governance, scalability.
Exactly. Yeah.
All of that stuff should really work, and of course, making sure that it's paying for it in a good way. But then, the actual use, the power of the usage, that should be an autonomous thing with the leaders and the teams that actually own the problem. So this is how we think about it, and most tools seem to do not work this way, and that's something that we think is basically with or without Favorial, I think this is a problem in the industry. But how do you feel about that? I mean, what's there?
Yeah, I totally agree with you. I totally, because you also have to remember that when you hand that over to IT and their way of work, most of the work you do in IT is repetitory. So you have to go through this phase of coding, and then you might have a peer review, and then you might go to a state environment and deployment procedure, and that's kind of quite fixed actually how you do that. So when you give that system to someone who works like that, then they will kind of say, that's the way the world works. That's how we do stuff. So that's how we describe things. But a lot of the business is actually about figuring out what not to do and trying to do things in new ways and different ways. And then a million different ways you can work actually. And when you give the ownership of those process for the work tools to IT, a lot of them unintentionally try to kind of use their own mindset on the system. Say, this is probably how you could do this in the system because that's how I could use it. And no bad intent on that, but it's just from their point of view, that would be logical and makes sense. And they're not seeing the other side of it that, oh yeah, that works for you, but it's hopeless for me. The whole mindset of it is just not the way we're working here. So, help me. So yeah, and I think that's really an advantage of Favorial, that you allow people to allow their teams to figure out how should we actually visualize our work and improve that and work around with that. What should our policies for doing stuff be? How should we do that? They can do that themselves and improve it themselves, and it doesn't affect anyone else. It's just for them, and that's really that is a strong plus for Favorial, that you can do that.
Are you seeing also trends in how IT is? I mean, I'm talking more generally now that, over the years, there's been many trends in good IT management. And now we've been pointing out some of the things that are can be challenging for IT. But I do want to say that there are a lot of IT managers out there that are actually really good at this stuff. I had a podcast with one of them, which is the head of IT at Volt. And it was very, very nice to listen to him, in my podcast, because it was a very, very modern way of thinking around IT's role in a very large, technology first hybrid organization. So, there's some very good stuff out there, but there's a difference between good examples and positive trends. So are you seeing some interesting also, apart from obviously AI disrupting everything, but are you seeing some interesting trends also in basically IT management?
Yes. I am. Not internally here, but that's again, it's so I think it's maturing basically. Back to that, but I think you're seeing more people using stuff like Wortley maps to actually kind of pinpoint where are the maturity of the different technologies and how should we handle them, and we should have more than one approach to the IT stack because we have some things that are really mature and should just be run by operational efficiency, and some things that are new and innovative like AI that we need to still figure out how to use the best way and how to get the most out of. And those are different kind of technology development stages for different systems, and we need to be able to handle all those different ways of working and methods within the same organization. Again, that's why you need something like Favorial that can handle that.
Cool. So, tell me what you're looking forward most to, coming year. Are there any book releases that you're you know is going to come that you're looking forward to, or conferences that you think will be particularly interesting? What's going to be the highlights here of this year?
Yeah. So right now I have 2 things there. So yeah, I think three things I'll mention. So one is, of course, now we've talked a lot about Faro, and now I can talk about some of the stuff I'm doing. So I'm really looking forward to the Dev conference in Malmö in November, because I'm curating the leadership track on that, and we have some really interesting people coming up that I can't really tell who is yet, but I'm looking forward to that. And I think a lot of you would do that as well if you're listening to this podcast. So look into that. And if you aren't able to attend, there's always the recording afterwards. So that's going to be fun. And then I could say books. I haven't read it yet, but Mike Burrows just published a new book last week, and that's really on my to-read list. Mike Burrows has done a lot of good work with Kanban, but not that he's done through the values and that part of the human part of it. So he has some really interesting perspectives, actually. And I'm really looking forward to reading his new book here. And then I'm currently reading a book as well that I just need to mention. And you might already know it, but if you haven't read The Art of Action, that should be to do, because that's really an eye-opener of some of the leadership trends we are talking about within IT right now, and that they are not really new. They've happened before, so that's something we can learn.
No, it's funny that you meant this. It's actually one of my absolute favorite books. In this field. I actually read it more than once, and I have recommended it to many. And one of the things I think is interesting is I think that book goes really to the core of agility, but without mentioning the word agile, I think, a single time in the book.
Exactly. Just in the start when he kind of the intro, but yeah, beside that, no, it doesn't.
Yeah, exactly.
It's really interesting.
Yeah, it's especially for anyone who's also like a history geek. It's
exactly.
It is, and it's also he writes really well. It's a very pleasurable book to read. It doesn't feel like you're reading something to learn better leadership and management techniques. It feels more like
you're reading about the Napoleon Wars and stuff like that. It's interesting.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
So that was 3 really good ones. So Art of Action by Stephen Bungie, and then we have Other Dev conference. That's in November. You said, right?
Yeah.
Cool.
And then Mike Burrows' new book.
It's fantastic.
I hope you liked that interview. If you did, you know what to do. Share it on your favorite social media so others can learn from the Faro community.